Hello and welcome to EnRoute Excursions, where you will hear snippets of longer interviews that are 10 minutes or less. Here is your host, Dennis Sanders. Greetings and welcome to this episode of EnRoute Excursions, where we take snippets of longer interviews and distill them down to about 10 minutes or less. I'm Dennis Sanders, your host. This is probably going to be the last Christmas that we will see Sears or Kmart in the American retail scene. And why is that? Some people say it's because Sears didn't keep up with the times. But that's only part of the problem. The other part of the problem is actually with one person, a hedge fund manager by the name of Eddie Lampert. Last summer, I spoke with retail journalist Warren Shoulberg, and he shared the story of the takeover of Sears by Eddie Lampert, what he did with the company, and why one of the largest and most well-known retailers in America went from hero to basically zero. Let's listen to Warren Shoulberg.
He had a great press agent who said that he was the next Warren Buffett, and he was going to be investing in the businesses, and wasn't going to it was going to be a hands-off owner, and all of that turned out to be absolutely untrue. And his strategy from the very beginning was to pull cash out of that business. It was not to run the businesses. If it had been to run the businesses, we would have seen very different activities. But instead, they kept selling real estate, and it wasn't just real estate. They sold brand names. They stopped investing in their stores. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but you look at Sears Kmart's capital expenditure budget versus a Target, and it was a fraction of it. They just weren't spending any money to keep the stores modern and to keep the stores up to date. Both Kmart and Sears had a lot of old stores that needed a lot of work, and they weren't spending it. So this wasn't just a real estate play to sell off real estate assets. It was to keep spending to a minimum and keep drawing cash out of those businesses that went back to the shareholders, of which Lampert was the biggest shareholder. He had 50% of the company. And there were all kinds of things. The example I've used several times is Sears owned a regional hardware store called Orchard Hardware on the West Coast. And it was a nice little business. They probably should have never bought it, but they did. Somewhere along the line, they sold it to investors for a modest amount of money, and they took the proceeds from the sale and paid out a dividend to Sears shareholders, of which Lampert got half of it. And they then the new owners, and Sears was still a minority owner of it, 49%, I think. And again, excuse me for not having the exact numbers in front of me, but they then took out a line of credit of about $600 million. And this is my recollection, and I, again, may not be precise on the numbers. They took that $600 million and issued another special dividend to their shareholders, of which Lampert and ESL Holdings, which is his company, got $300 million of it. Old Orchard now had $600 million in debt that they didn't have the day before. Within 18 months, Old Orchard filed for bankruptcy and was out of business. So again, it was a plan to take cash out of it, to send that cash back to shareholders and not to invest in the business. If they had taken out a $600 million credit line and invested it in the stores, that would have been one thing, but that's not what they did. So this is what Lampert kept doing. He sold the big brand names, and so the store count kept diminishing. He took their best stores, their best performing stores, and sold those first, because those were the most valuable assets, and those stores now have Targets in them or Home Depots. So when Sears Holdings filed for bankruptcy in 2019, they still had 1,800 stores, which was pretty significant. Lampert convinced the bankruptcy court that he was the best choice for keeping the company going, and they came out of bankruptcy in mid 2019 with 400 stores, and within a year they were down to 197, and now in 2021, and Transformco, which is the company that owns Sears and Kmart now, does not no longer answers questions or talks to anybody about what they're doing. They're a private company, obviously. As best as I can tell, and I talked to some other folks who are following it even more closely than I do, there's about 50 stores left between Sears and Kmart. There may be, I don't know, 30 Sears stores left and 20 Kmarts. And that's it. They're just not a player anymore. So it's a real tragedy. These stores might not have made it under the best of management, based on the competition from Amazon and Walmart. But it didn't have to turn out this way. They could have played a role,
Thanks for listening. To hear the full episode, please go to enroutepodcast.org. Take care.